There was a man, the kind-hearted clown of the neighborhood. Everyone thought he was the perfect example of a decent person. But no one knew that behind that smile, a true monster was hiding. John Wayne Gacy, a man who made people laugh during the day and built his own dark world at night. What was hidden beneath his house? Why did no one suspect a thing? Let's uncover this dark secret. I am Elias Blackwood, your guide in Crime Darkroom, where darkness comes to light. The story you're about to hear is not just an ordinary crime. It's the darkest nightmare brought to life. A man whose smile was a mask hiding one of the most terrifying secrets in history. If you dare, join me. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago. From the outside, his family might have seemed like an ordinary one, but behind closed doors, it was a completely different world. His father was a violent and ruthless man who constantly humiliated him for the slightest reason, calling him a worthless failure who would never amount to anything. John was a child who, instead of love, grew up experiencing fear and shame. Things weren't any better at school. The kids mocked him because his heart condition prevented him from participating in physical activities. John was alone there too, with no friends and none of the support a child at that age desperately needs. But even in that darkness, something was growing inside him, something no one could see. Perhaps it was the same feeling of humiliation and rejection that slowly transformed into a dark fire. No one knew, but this quiet boy would one day become one of the most terrifying killers in history. Although John appeared to be a quiet and calm child on the surface, there were behaviors that, if someone had paid close attention, might have revealed glimpses of the darkness to come. Even as a child, he developed a strange habit. He enjoyed experiencing power. For instance, when he caught an animal, it wasn't so much about curiosity. It was the thrill of having control over it that he found satisfying. In his teenage years, these behaviors gradually became more intense. John always tried to blend into the crowd, but when someone got close to him, he would sometimes say or do things that made others uncomfortable. Once, he told one of his friends that he liked imagining he could make people do whatever he wanted. His strange behavior caused him to be further ostracized, deepening his feelings of loneliness and anger. It was as if he was building a dark world in his mind, a place where he held absolute power. To others, these actions might have seemed like mere oddities, but for John, they were the prelude to something no one could have ever imagined. As John entered adulthood, it was as if he managed to craft a new mask for himself. He was no longer the shy, introverted child. He became a man determined to be noticed in society. He started working in construction and quickly realized how his friendly demeanor and sense of humor could win people over. John even entered local politics, and by attending parties and social events, he solidified his position as a respected man in the neighborhood. But what made people trust him even more was the unusual job he chose for himself, becoming a clown. He introduced himself as Pogo, the Clown, and would appear at children's birthday parties or charity events. His clown smile and colorful costume made it impossible for anyone to even suspect what was hidden behind this cheerful and friendly facade. John appeared to be the perfect citizen in the community, a man who not only cared for his work and family but also made time for the community. But this was just a mask. Behind this facade, a dark and terrifying world was slowly starting to reveal itself. Behind the mask of the friendly clown and the respected man of the neighborhood, John Wayne Gacy was a ruthless predator. His victims were often teenage boys and young men who were either looking for work or, for some reason, in need of help. John would lure them to his home with job offers at his construction company or with tempting promises. John would immobilize his victims completely using ropes and handcuffs, and then the true darkness would begin. Violence, torture, and ultimately strangulation with a rope were methods he used repeatedly. But what makes this story even more terrifying is that after each murder, John would bury the victim's body in the basement of his home, a place that, quite literally, became a personal graveyard. John would immobilize his victims completely using ropes and handcuffs, and then the true darkness would begin. Violence, torture, and ultimately strangulation with a rope were methods he used repeatedly. But what makes this story even more terrifying is that after each murder, John would bury the victim's body in the basement of his home, a place that, quite literally, became a personal graveyard. No one could believe that the man who always smiled in the community and appeared so kind was committing such horrific crimes at night. But this mask couldn't last forever. Behind the closed doors of John Wayne Gacy's house, a horrifying secret was hidden. His victims were often teenage boys and young men who fell into his trap with false promises. The terrifying number, 33 lives cruelly taken. But perhaps this wasn't the entire story. Maybe the real number was even higher, victims who were never found. This number was enough to forever cement John Wayne Gacy's name in the list of history's darkest figures. But John Wayne Gacy's mask couldn't stay intact forever. The moment everything began to unravel was the disappearance of a teenage boy named Robert Peast. Robert had been last seen talking to John, and this small clue started to unravel the hidden crimes of Gacy. When the police first visited John's house, what they found was suspicious, a strange, foul odor coming from the basement. But John calmly attributed the smell to plumbing issues. However, the police's suspicions didn't subside. They carefully kept an eye on him, and with a search warrant, they returned to the house. This was where the horrifying truth was revealed. The police began digging in the basement, and what they found shocked the world. Bodies buried layer by layer beneath the soil. The mask of the cheerful clown had fallen, and now the world was face to face with the true identity of one of the darkest serial killers in history. When John Wayne Gacy was arrested, it seemed like he had completely discarded his mask. Gone was the smiling man and the friendly clown. During the interrogation, with calmness and without any remorse, he began telling stories that were unbelievable, even to the most experienced police officers. Gacy confessed to the murder of 33 people. With details no one could have imagined, he explained how he chose his victims, how he deceived them and lured them to his house, and ultimately how he killed them. With a tone as if he were telling an ordinary story, he described how he buried the bodies in the basement, and when he ran out of space, he was forced to throw some of them into the river. But what was most terrifying was his calmness and indifference, as if these crimes meant nothing to him. For John, it was just a game that now with its bitter end had plunged the world into shock. John Wayne Gacy's trial took place in 1979 and became one of the most controversial cases in American history. The courtroom felt like a stage. On one side, the families of the victims seeking justice, and on the other, Gacy, calmly sitting at the defense table. During the trial, Gacy's lawyers tried to prove that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. However, the evidence and his own confessions turned everything against him. The horrifying details of the crimes, the way he tortured his victims, and the coldness he displayed left no room for defense. The jury only needed a few hours to deliver their verdict: the death penalty. Gacy was sentenced to death by lethal injection. For many, this verdict was a form of justice, but nothing could bring back those 33 lost lives. During the trial, Gacy not only showed no signs of remorse, but even made jokes. For everyone, these behaviors were a clear indication of the monster hidden behind this man's face. But now the game was over, and John Wayne Gacy had to face the consequences of his actions. The case of John Wayne Gacy not only shocked the world, but also had a profound impact on society and the U.S. legal system. This case showed how a serial killer could continue his crimes for years without suspicion, while the community that seemingly supported him failed to unmask his true nature. One of the biggest changes was the reform of the missing persons reporting system. Before this case, the police often didn't take missing teenagers seriously, assuming they had run away on their own. However, after this case, laws were passed that forced the police to follow up on these reports more quickly and seriously. Additionally, this case led society to pay more attention to mental health and the psychopathy of individuals. Gacy, a man who appeared normal and even respectable, was, in fact, a monster. This made forensic psychology a more important aspect in criminal cases. In the end, the Gacy case was a wake-up call for society. Not to trust appearances, as sometimes darkness hides behind the brightest smiles. This story was not only a terrifying lesson from the past, but also a warning for the future. John Wayne Gacy, one of the most notorious serial killers in history, stands alongside names like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. What sets him apart is the mask of kindness and successful social life that concealed his darkest crimes. His use of the clown persona, Pogo, to lure victims forever links Gacy's image with terror. His name serves as a grim reminder of the monsters that sometimes hide behind ordinary faces. Here was Elias Blackwood, with you in the darkness. Thank you for watching this story on Crime Darkroom, where darkness illuminates and truth emerges from the shadows. If this journey into the world of crime intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, share your time, and stay tuned for more stories. Until next time, remember, crime never sleeps, so neither do we.